I'm sorry for the government's actions and inactions that caused the dog slaughter and allowed it to continue for so many years.
Those words after a decades-long fight for recognition. The federal government apologized to the people of Nunavik, Quebec, for its role in the mass killing of sled dogs in the 1950s and 60s. The long-awaited apology came over the weekend, and with it, a sense of closure for some. Thanks for joining us. Many Inuit in northern Quebec lost a critical part of their lives in the sled dog slaughter. Authorities were allowed to kill the dogs if they were running loose. This weekend, the federal minister for Crown Indigenous Relations issued an apology. The CBC's Juanita Taylor was there.
Junior May has kept a dog team for 28 years. Purebred Huskies, or as the Inuit call them, Qimmiit.
It's holding on to part of my heritage, my culture.
For him, Ottawa's apology for a historic call of sled dogs is a long time coming.
I'm just happy that it's finally happening with the federal government.
On behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, I am sorry. I'm sorry. Please forgive us.
The apology on Saturday was for the slaughter of more than 1,000 sled dogs in the 1950s and 60s. Inuit traditionally relied on Qimmiit for hunting, fishing, and trapping, but they never tied them up, creating tension with non-Inuit. The policy of culling them devastated the Inuit way of life.
We know that societally, this is an intricate web of colonization that still impacts us and that we still don't have equity for in this country.
It was very sad when I first heard about it.
Pita Atomy is president of Makivik Corporation, representing Nunavik Inuit. He has been leading the push for this apology since the early 2000s. Now it's come, along with $45 million in compensation.
It's going to go some ways to help the people that need the help, especially the elders that are still alive and the descendants of the families that lost their dogs.
The money will go directly to families affected by the dog slaughter and for initiatives to help promote the revitalization of Qimmiit in the region.
It's sad in a way that it's only happening in 2024 because a lot of our elders are not with us anymore. But for their families, I'm happy for everyone.
For the Inuit of Nunavik, a step closer to healing the trauma of the past. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Gujwak, Nunavik.
This week is National Addictions Awareness Week across the country. And this year, the CBC's Virginie Anne is diving deep into how addictions affect Yukoners. We'll be airing stories all week, highlighting the work already being done and learning what more the territory needs. Virginie Anne joins me now to talk more about her series. So, Virginie, you've been covering the substance use crisis in the Yukon for 3 years now. Tell me more about this series you've produced.
So the focus of the series is on support and really on trying to understand the roots of addiction and what's out there for people who need help. I wanted to understand why it feels like there's a gap between those who are currently impacted by the toxic substances, those who are losing people they love, and those who are ready and willing to provide support. So I completed 4 stories for this week with crucial conversations and perspectives I gathered for this project.
Can you share some of the perspectives you heard in doing this, Virginie?
Everyone I've been speaking with, whenever I'm covering a death or even an unrelated subject, says that there's not enough time to heal before another overdose happens. Elders are saying they are heartbroken burying their children. They say it feels unnatural. And then you have the children who are growing up without parents. And sadly, people are turning to substances to cope with that constant grief and trauma. It's a never-ending circle. This very month started with the overdose of a young mother known to so many people, Lacey Scarf. There was a rally to honor not only her life, but all of those lost to addiction. Here's what I heard during the rally.
It's been snowballing, and I've seen a change in behaviors. I've seen a change in all of our people. And I think I've lost so many friends and so many family members.
I said a lot of our children are losing their parents. With that, we're losing our culture again. It's like history repeating itself.
So the Yukon has been under a substance use health emergency for the last 2 years. It has the highest rate of deaths due to toxic drugs in the country per capita since at least 2021. So far this year, at least 13 people have died due to toxic substances. Last year, that number was 23 people. One thing important to note when it comes to overdoses is that even though the Yukon is vast, almost all overdoses happen here in Whitehorse among Indigenous people. But those deaths are being felt in each community. Over the last few years, 5 out of 14 First Nations across the territory have declared states of emergency due to the toxic drug crisis. That's Ross River Dena Council, the First Nation of Natchonagdan, Carcross-Tagish First Nation, Kwanlin-Dun First Nation, and the Vuntut-Gwitchin First Nation. So my first story for this series is tomorrow. I joined the Moccasin Mobile Outreach Van as it connects with vulnerable people in Whitehorse.
Okay, thank you so much for your work, Virginie. That's the CBC's Virginie Ann in Whitehorse tonight. Meanwhile, in Watson Lake, healthcare workers are warning people that toxic drugs continue to circulate in the community. They say cocaine and crack laced with fentanyl have recently caused some users to overdose. Cameron Grandy is with the Yukon government's Mental Wellness and Substance Use Department. He says there are free services available in Watson Lake to help people quit or at least use in a safer way. Those include fentanyl testing strips and naloxone kits at the local hospital. The hospital also offers medications that help reduce opioid cravings and help manage withdrawal symptoms.
We're dealing with human beings. We don't have a traditionally straightforward prescriptive approach. We want to work with each individual. So I just want to encourage people that if you're coming to a mental wellness and substance use service, you're coming into a place that is non-judgmental and that wants to take some information and direction from you on how you want to set the goals in your life.
Grandy also says there's a national overdose response line people can call prior to consuming. You can reach that hotline at the number on your screen. That number is 1-888-688-6677. To recognize National Addictions Awareness Week in Yellowknife today, people gathered for a walk and a lunch event to bring the community together. Jocelyn Chappelle was there.
The cold weather didn't deter a large group from walking downtown, starting at the Tree of Peace Friendship Center. The center organized the walk to help spread the word about resources in town. Roy Rasmus is a mental health counselor and co-owner of Dene Wellness Warriors. He says it's good to see people out at an event to raise awareness about addiction.
Become aware and tell others about it, and to encourage people that you know your friends, your relatives, even people you don't know. Encourage them to seek help if they're having problems, because a lot of times that's all we need. Just that little encouragement to go and even go with them to talk to someone, an addictions counselor or whatever.
Christina Moore is an Indigenous youth worker at the Tree of Peace. She was one of the faces organizing the event. She says starting and ending at the center is a great way to familiarize people with the place.
It's a great way to get youth out to familiarize themselves with what we have to offer, and also bring together different community organizations. Home Base is here, the Foster Family Coalition, just to show that we're all supporting this really important cause.
Kathy Arden works at the center and organized the walk as well. She says that the week is all about having discussions with one another and reminding people of little things they can do within their community.
So maybe as an example of one small change you can make is just by saying a simple hello to one of the street people that are out there, or you know, they're quite prevalent in our community. Just by saying hello, hi, how are you? You know, by acknowledging that they're there.
The walk ended with a pizza lunch and performance by the Yellowknife's Dene drummers. William Greenland also attended to say a few words and perform a flute song. Moore says that they have a lot of programs scheduled for youth. Some of those events include drumming circle nights and a drum making workshop. She encourages all interested youth to register and try it out. The Tree of Peace will also have pamphlets in the main lobby this week with resources available. Jocelyn Chappelle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
It's day 11 of the Canada Post strike, and small businesses in the Yukon are feeling the pinch. Yukon Soaps operates out of the center of the territory in Mayo, and there, Canada Post is the only option for shipping. As Megan Dooling reports, the company decided to suspend online orders today until the strike is over.
Even without a postal strike, shipping is a barrier for the small business operating out of Mayo.
Over the past year or so, we have seen a decline in online sales because people get to the shopping cart and they see how much shipping costs and they see how long it takes and they choose not to shop.
With the strike, Hogan made the difficult decision to stop online orders altogether.
There have been lots of tears and lots of stress for sure. But I also support the workers and those striking, and that we have seen, you know, for several months, if not years, the stress and conditions that Canada Post, especially locally, are put under.
Hogan says she supports the workers because people providing an essential service in her community should be earning enough to live.
Meanwhile, Trinity Technology hasn't been able to ship out a single order since the strike began.
We quite literally fill orders coast to coast, where we send orders as far as Halifax, all the way from the Yukon. The thing is, a lot of people, when you shop online, you don't really think about where the order is being fulfilled. You just see it, it's in stock, and it's free shipping as well, too.
The small company can't afford to use alternate carriers because their cost margin is so tight.
For example, the order that we got this morning, which is a monitor, that was going to Toronto, where we had to cancel that order. Effectively, in the pricing difference to fulfill that order, where we're used to paying about $18 to $22 a piece, we are now seeing shipping rates of $120 to $200 if we try to use any other type of service.
Despite the drop in business from online customers, Mac says 90% of sales take place in store. But still, Christmas is on the way, and he hopes the strike is resolved soon.
Workers continue to walk the picket line in Whitehorse. Canada Post says they're committed to reaching an agreement with the union, but progress over the weekend was limited. Megan Dooling, CBC News, Whitehorse.
A UN report says last year, 140 women or girls per day were killed by an intimate partner or family member. The report was released today, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's prompted some Canadian politicians to renew calls to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Katie Nicholson reports.
Last members to please rise.
A House united in silence to recognize violence against women, but very much divided on declaring it an epidemic.
It is an epidemic. Will the Premier do the right thing once and for all? No more studies, no more committees. Declare it an epidemic and do the right thing today.
The opposition NDP seizing upon this International Day of Action to renew pressure on the Ford government to push a stalled bill forward, which would declare an intimate partner violence epidemic. Ford didn't directly answer criticisms about the declaration delay.
I have 4 daughters, and anyone ever touch my daughters, it'd be the worst day of their lives.
The opposition says that's just more spin.
This is larger than Doug Ford's family. This is about the thousands of women and children across Ontario who don't have a member of provincial parliament or a premier as a dad, who need support.
In Ottawa, more appeals to politicians to take action on gun and coercive control legislation from survivors and their family members like Brian Sweeney.
My daughter was a beautiful soul.
Whose daughter Angie was murdered by her ex last year.
The new laws need to be enforced now. They will help stop women and children from being murdered by domestic and intimate partner gun violence in their homes where they should be safe.
It's not just Canada. Women took to the streets across the world today to vent their anger.
The United Nations aimed to eliminate violence against women by 2030, but in the last year, reports suggest that the number of women and girls killed by partners and family members increased by more than 6% globally. Numbers that suggest this is a growing problem. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
This is CBC North on your smart TV because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News North streaming channel. You can see your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News North, your local news streaming channel, is now available.
Release him.
Why?
Well, I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
This man is actually in my custody.
What did he do?
Well,
Did you hear that? I'm being charged with,
This ranch isn't going down. Not on my watch.
If the car comes with the deal, I'm in.
Cheers, dragons!
I look forward to fighting you on many a deal.
And we look forward to meeting you.
Dragon's Den. Watch free on CBC Gem.
They reported a shipment of cocaine stolen 2 weeks ago.
We all have our vices, Detective.
oh, you find that surprising?
Dust, noise, and lowlifes.
Bloody hell.
RCMP in Resolute Bay, Nunavut, have charged a 44-year-old man with first-degree murder. Police say they received a call to check on the well-being of a person on Friday. When officers arrived at the home, they found the body of a dead woman. The Major Crimes Unit charged and arrested the man at the scene. RCMP say there's a publication ban and more information will not be provided at this time. An update now to a story we told you about last week. The BC College of Social Work suspended a social worker in Watson Lake, Yukon, over her belief in conspiracy theories. That prompted the Yukon government to acknowledge its lack of legislation for social workers, and it promised to create new rules. The Association for Social Workers in Northern Canada says it's a step in the right direction. Cheryl Kawaja reports.
Yukon's complete lack of regulatory oversight is well known to social workers who practice here. A commitment to change that is being well received by many.
I am generally a pretty hopeful guy, but I know that it's a long and complicated process, and I mean that doesn't diminish any of my drive to try to help contribute to this, and many of my colleagues feel the same way.
In Watson Lake, the Liard Aboriginal Women's Circle is pleased with news that the Yukon plans to step in line with the rest of the country. However, there are still concerns. As we heard last week, the group also wants Ottawa to take some responsibility. Indigenous Services Canada sometimes foots the bill for counsellors who are working for non-insured health benefits.
This profession should be monitored, and certainly the federal government, I think, has to answer some questions about how they monitor their counsellors. And if it's happened here, I wonder if it's happening elsewhere in Canada. What other services are being paid without any kind of oversight committee? I think that's what has to be looked into.
In an email to CBC, Indigenous Services Canada says the status of any provider receiving funds from non-insured health benefits is reviewed quarterly by checking with the regulatory bodies. So in this case, the social worker in question would no longer qualify for that funding. That's because she has been suspended by the BC College of Social Workers. But Ottawa points back at the Yukon and says that's where the responsibility to regulate lies. Indigenous Services Canada says, we invite anyone who has concerns regarding the competence of a health provider to file a complaint with the relevant provincial territorial regulatory body. But again, the Yukon doesn't have a regulatory body, and it will take time before that legislation is created. The Association for Social Workers in Northern Canada says it's complicated.
It requires buy-in from community members, from NGOs, from government, and it requires legislation. And it requires building partnerships with our First Nations here in the Yukon and again across the territories.
And add to that, the government that is promising to bring in legislative oversight for social workers now has less than a year before it goes back to the polls. So when, if ever, this oversight for social workers might happen is anybody's guess. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
In the Northwest Territories, the government is still failing to meet its Indigenous hiring targets. Half of the Northwest Territories population is Indigenous, but as of last March, only 29% of public servants were. That percentage has remained largely unchanged for decades, despite a new Indigenous hiring plan that rolled out a couple years ago. But the minister in charge of the public service says the plan is still being implemented. She's optimistic that numbers will improve.
It is not going to help if we try to press too hard and have impatience when we are actually asking people to change the way they think.
Advocates for Indigenous representation told the CBC they're skeptical. They say that in order to hire and keep more Indigenous employees, the NWT government will need to make deeper changes to how it operates, and that requires hiring Indigenous people in more senior positions. The Kikitani Inuit Association has received $2.1 million from the federal government to help train Inuit for the natural resources sector. The money will be used to buy heavy equipment simulators at the Pond Inlet Research and Training Center. It's also meant to remove systemic barriers Inuit face when it comes to working in the sector.
It is very important for us to ensure that the training facility is in place in the next couple of years so that we could train people to have jobs in the future. It is very important for us as Kikitani Inuit Association, and also it benefits beneficiaries to get more training as needed.
The money is being awarded through the Indigenous Natural Resource Partnerships Program. Nunavut is no stranger to boil water advisories. This year alone, 11 of Nunavut's 25 communities have been under that order at least once. The territorial government says those notices suggest the alert system is working as it should, and there's money coming to improve water quality. Samuel Watt has that story.
Gloria Anawak is one of 14 people living inside a 3-bedroom home in Baker Lake. Most of them are young kids who are vulnerable to dirty water.
We always try to make sure that they have the boiled water, that they don't have tap water, because we're afraid for them to get sick.
Baker Lake residents were told to boil their water in June. 5 months later, that order was finally lifted on Friday. But advisory or no advisory, Gloria says she never drinks straight from the tap.
Seems like for the past few years, it's been a lot of boiled water advisories. So it just feels like it's no use having tap water even.
Nunavut can trust the water that is coming out of their taps.
That's Nunavut's Assistant Deputy Minister for Infrastructure, Matthew Huff. He says the boil water advisories are a sign the alert system is working. It flags when the water is and isn't safe to drink, just like it has with 11 communities this year in Nunavut.
But it's no secret Nunavut's water infrastructure is ageing. With help from the feds, the territorial government is pouring more than $300 million into upgrades over the next 4 years, and Baker Lake will be one of the communities benefiting from that.
2023, when water quality strategy was finalized, the momentum really got going with regards to addressing the physical infrastructure.
A United Nations expert on water rights visited Canada earlier this year. In his final report in September, he highlighted Nunavut's water woes with infrastructure. He also stressed the importance of knowledge held by women and elders, people who know the water and the environment. And Nunavut's MP Laurie Edlout agrees.
Unfortunately, in Canada, the colonial governments choose not to see them as experts in our own lands.
Indigenous Services Canada says after devolution, water responsibilities are now in the hands of the territorial government. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Softball Yukon has struck a deal with the Yukon government. At issue is a proposed new elementary school that will be built on top of 2 ball fields. The land in the Takini neighborhood is already zoned for the potential construction of a school, but there's currently 2 ball diamonds, and they would have to go. Under the agreement, one of Softball Yukon's remaining fields would be upgraded.
We are growing, and we didn't want to have to restrict our programming and potentially lose members that we would never get back. So yeah, it's vital that we have these fields, and we're excited about the idea of potentially having 4 really high quality fields that will make it easier for us to host big events again in the future and things like that.
Under the agreement, Softball Yukon will also get priority access to the new school's nearby multi-purpose field during baseball season. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Oh, wait, are we allowed to touch? No, it's fine, yeah.
In Australia, a unique experiment
How come you guys don't have a table? We do have a table.
is about to unfold. A school swap that brings together 12 students from very different cultures and religions.
You do what you want to do, it's fine, I'll do me.
My fear is instead of building bridges, they'll end up blowing them.
I want to be seen as me and not my hijab, not scary terrorists or something like that.
This is CBC North on your smart TV, because CBC News is now streaming local. Local news and weather on your connected TV or favorite device. CBC News North, streaming now.
is pounding.
This is very hard to do.
We both know it's not an easy task.
The Great Canadian Baking Show. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.